Girl, I am tired of you. You behave like a child. You don't even have sense.
I am sorry. I will do better.
The day I understood what my life had become, I was standing in my own kitchen, crying into a pot of soup. Not because the pepper was too much, not because I had cut onions. I was crying because it was my birthday. I had turned 23 that morning, and my husband Emmanuel had not said a single word to me, not one word. He woke up, checked his phone, dressed himself, and walked out of the house. No happy birthday, no smile, nothing. But 30 minutes later, I heard him outside laughing loudly with the neighbor's husband about something on television. That sound, his laugh, cut through me like a cold blade, because I remember the time when that laugh was meant for me, when I was the one who made him smile like that, when I was 17 years old and stupid enough to believe that a man choosing me was the same thing as a man loving me. I turned off the gas. I sat down on the kitchen floor and I asked myself the question I had been avoiding for 5 years. Flora, how did you get here? The story starts in Onitsha, in a yellow-painted compound with a mango tree in the front yard. That was my father's house. That was where I grew up, Flora Obi, second born of 4 children, daughter of a secondary school vice principal, and a woman who sold fabric in the main market and could calculate profit in her head faster than any calculator. We were not wealthy people, but we were a family that understood the value of standing up straight. My father used to say, "Flora, your education is the land I am giving you. No man can take land from a woman who owns it herself." I heard those words. I just did not listen to them. Not when Emmanuel Chukwuemeka Nwosu came into my life. He was 29, I was 17. He drove a fairly clean Honda Accord and wore his shirt tucked in and his shoes polished. He smelled of something woody and expensive, and the first time he stood close to me, I felt my whole body go still, the way the air goes still just before rain falls. He saw me at a friend's birthday party. I was in my school uniform because I had come straight from afternoon lessons. Most men would have looked away. Emmanuel looked closer. He said, "You have a serious face, like you're always thinking about something important." Nobody had ever said that to me. At home, I was just Flora, go this, Flora, go that. At school, I was average. But this man, this older, calm, put-together man, was looking at me like I was the most interesting person in the room full of adults. I was 17. I did not understand that being noticed by the wrong person is not a blessing, it is a warning. He started calling me. Every evening, after my mother thought I was reading, I was on the phone with Emmanuel. He asked about my dreams. He told me I was wasting myself in a small town. He said, "A girl like you deserves more than what these people around you can offer." These people, my parents, my family, the people who loved me. It was already separating me from them, and I thought it was romance. By the time I finished my secondary school exams, I was so deep inside his words that I could not see clearly anymore. When my admission came for a nursing program in Enugu, Emmanuel told me I did not need it. He said he would take care of me. He said school was full of distractions and bad influences. He said he wanted to marry me and that a wife did not need a certificate when her husband was her provision. My mother cried. My father sat in his chair and went quiet in that way that meant he was in pain too deep for words. My younger sister held my hand and asked me not to go. I told them they did not understand. I packed my things on a Saturday morning. While my father was at school, I left a note on the dining table. I walked out of that yellow compound and climbed into Emmanuel's Honda, and as we drove away, I looked back once at the mango tree in the front yard. I did not know it would be 3 years before I came back, and when I did come back, I would not be the same girl who left.
The first 6 months felt like a song.
Emmanuel rented a small flat for us in New Haven, Enugu. It had a sitting room, one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a bathroom where the tap sometimes ran and sometimes didn't. It was not luxury, but to me it felt like the whole world because I was in it with him. He bought me things, not big things, but thoughtful things. A pair of earrings, a Sunday dress, a small bottle of perfume that I kept on the windowsill and used only on special days so it would last longer. He cooked with me on weekends. He held my hand when we walked to church. He introduced me to people as my wife, Flora, and I felt those words like sunshine on my face every single time. I thought, this is what love is. This is what my parents could not understand. But love, real love, does not have conditions attached to it in small print that you only discover after you have already signed. The changes came slowly. That is the thing I want you to understand. It was not one dramatic morning where he became a different person. It was small things, one by one, like water dripping on stone. You don't notice the stone is breaking until one day you look and there is a crack all the way through. The first sign was what he said about my clothes. I had worn a fitted blouse to visit a neighbor one afternoon. When I came back, Emmanuel was sitting in a parlor and his face was closed, the way a window shuts before a storm. "Where did you go dressed like that?" I was confused. It was just a blouse. I wore it to his cousin's birthday 2 months earlier and he had said I looked nice. I was just at Auntie Ngozi's place down the street. He didn't ask where. I asked why you left this house looking like that. I felt something shift in the air between us, something cold. I apologized. I don't even know what I was apologizing for, but I said sorry, and he nodded like a teacher accepting a late assignment. That night, he was warm again, and I told myself it was nothing. He was just protective. That was love, wasn't it? Caring about what your wife wore? I kept telling myself that as the rules multiplied. Don't wear that skirt outside. Don't visit that woman alone. Her husband has loose eyes. Don't call your friend Chidima too often. She's a bad influence. Come home before 5. Don't laugh too loud when his friends are around. Sit down when he is talking. Don't interrupt. Don't question. Don't. The word no became the furniture of our home. It was in every room. I kept bumping into it no matter where I turned. And then one evening, 8 months into our marriage, Emmanuel came home late and I made the mistake of asking where he had been. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice so quiet it was almost kind, "Flora, you left your father's house to come and ask me questions? Is that what you came here to do?" And then he said the sentence that would live inside me for years like a splinter I could not pull out. "You have nowhere else to go. Remember that." I stood in that kitchen and I felt the floor shift under my feet because he was right and we both knew it. I had left school. I had left my family. I had no income, no qualifications, no plan outside of him. I had handed this man every single key to my life, and now he was standing in front of me, letting me know, softly but clearly, that he knew exactly what he held. That was the night the dream ended. I just didn't know it yet, because the heart is stubborn. The heart will keep searching for the good in someone long after the evidence has told you to stop. So, I stayed. I adjusted. I became smaller, quieter, more careful. I learned his moods like a weather forecast, the tight jaw that meant do not speak, the foot that tapped that meant something was about to explode, the particular silence that meant I had already done something wrong, even if I did not know what it was. I became an expert in surviving a man I once thought was my safe place. And then I got pregnant, and I thought, God forgive my foolishness, I thought a baby would bring us back together. If this story is already touching something deep inside you, if you recognize this pain or you know someone who does, please subscribe and stay with Flora's story. What happens next would change everything you thought you knew about this marriage. I was 20 years old when I found out I was carrying Emmanuel's child. I sat in that bathroom for a long time after the test showed positive, holding the small plastic stick in my hand and feeling two things at the same time: a terrified kind of joy and a quiet, shameful fear. Joy because something alive was growing inside me. Fear because I already knew somewhere in the part of me that had stopped lying to itself that bringing a child into this home was not going to fix what was broken. But I was 20, and 20 can still hope. I cooked his favorite meal that evening, ofe with 2 large pieces of goat meat, the way his mother made it. I set the table properly. I even wore the blue dress he had once said made me look pretty. When he sat down, I told him. He put his fork down. He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded slowly and said, "Okay, make sure you are eating well." That was it. No embrace, no tears, no excitement. Just, "Okay, eat well," as if I had told him the generator needed fuel. I went to the bedroom and buried my face in the pillow so he would not hear me cry. My body changed, my belly grew, and with it, my isolation grew too. Emmanuel would not let me go for antenatal alone, but most times he was too busy to take me himself, so I simply missed appointments. He did not want me calling my mother for advice because, as he said, your people will start putting ideas in your head. His own mother, a large woman with a permanent frown named Mama Nwosu, visited once and looked at my belly and said to her son in Igbo, not even bothering to lower her voice, "She is too thin. A thin woman cannot carry a child properly. I told you to marry a full woman." Emmanuel said nothing to defend me. I sat in my own home and was discussed like I was not present, like furniture that had turned out to be the wrong size. The pregnancy was hard. I vomited every morning until I was weak. I had no one to call. Chidima had moved to Lagos. My mother did not even know I was pregnant because Emmanuel had made me feel like calling home was an act of disloyalty. My neighbors were pleasant, but we were not close. I had learned to keep people at a distance because Emmanuel did not like me having friends he hadn't approved. I was 20 years old, pregnant, lonely, and running out of reasons to keep believing things would get better. My son, David, was born on a Thursday in October. The moment they placed him on my chest, I wept. Not from pain, though the pain had been enormous. I wept because he was real and warm, and his eyes were closed, and his fists were curled, and he was the most honest thing that had ever happened to me. He had not come with conditions. He did not need me to be smaller or quieter or more obedient. He just needed me. For the first time in years, I felt needed in a way that was pure. Emmanuel came to the hospital and held the baby for 4 minutes. Then he said he had a meeting and left. His mother arrived an hour later, inspected the baby, announced that the child looked like the Nwosu side of the family, as if I had played no part in his creation, and began giving me instructions about what to feed the baby and how to bathe him and when to sleep, all in the tone of a woman correcting a stubborn child. I was sore. I was exhausted. I had just pushed a human being out of my body, and this woman sat beside my hospital bed and talked to me like I was still auditioning for the role of acceptable wife. But something had changed inside me. It was small at first, like an ember, not yet a fire, but it was there. I looked at my son's face and I thought, I will not let him grow up watching his mother disappear. I just had no idea yet how hard it would be to find my way back to myself, and I had no idea what was coming, what Emmanuel was doing outside that home, what he had been hiding, what one phone call in the middle of an ordinary afternoon would drag out into the open like a body pulled from water. I did not know, but it was coming. David was 2 years old when I found the messages. I was not snooping. I want to be clear about that because Emmanuel always said I was suspicious without reason, and I had believed him for so long that I had started to police my own instincts. I was not looking through his phone. I had picked it up from the table to check the time because the wall clock had stopped working, and a notification slid across the screen before I could put it down. The name saved was Emeka Work. But the message that came through said, "I miss you. When are you coming back? I've been waiting since Saturday." The kind of message a work contact does not send. My hands went cold. I stood there in the middle of my sitting room, my son playing with a plastic car at my feet, and I felt the ground opened slowly beneath me. Not because a man had cheated, though yes, that pain was there, sharp and humiliating, but because of what rushed in behind the pain, a thought so clear it frightened me. He was never who he said he was. And if he was never who he said he was, then what had I given up my life for? I put the phone down. I went to the kitchen. I boiled water for tea I did not drink. I sat with David until he fell asleep. And then I sat in the dark for a very long time, turning over the past 5 years in my hands like pieces of broken glass, being careful, finally understanding all the cuts. The control, the isolation, the reminders that I had nowhere else to go. They were not the actions of a man who loved me too much. They were the actions of a man who needed to make sure I never became strong enough to leave. When Emmanuel came home that night, I said nothing. I said nothing the next day either. But something had moved inside me that could not be unmoved. A woman who has been sleeping in a burning house and has finally smelled the smoke does not go back to sleep. She starts looking for the door. I called my mother for the first time in 2 years. When she heard my voice, she went quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Flora." Just my name, just that. But the way she said it, the relief and pain and love all pressed into those 2 syllables, I had to press my mouth against my mouth to keep the sound in. "Mama, I need to come home," I said. She said, "Your room is still here." That was all I needed to hear. But leaving Emmanuel was not going to be quiet. It was not going to be a simple goodbye and a packed bag. Because around this time, Emmanuel had started positioning himself as a community man. He had joined the planning committee of our area church. He gave donations publicly. He was photographed at charity events. He had built, very carefully, over the years I was inside that house being worn down, the image of a responsible, upstanding man. He was respected, he was praised, and he intended to keep it that way. What he did not account for was Adiaze. Adiaze Okonkwo was 20 years old. She lived 2 streets away, and she had been seeing Emmanuel for over a year, sending him messages signed with her real name because she did not know he had a wife and a 2-year-old son at home. She did not know until the day Emmanuel's phone rang while he was in the bathroom, and I picked it up, and a young woman's voice said, "Emeka, are you coming tonight? My parents are asking about you again." I said, "Who are you?" Silence. Then, "Who is this?" "I am his wife, Flora Onwosu. We have a son together. He is 2 years old. And I think there are some things we need to talk about, you and I." There are moments in life where everything shifts, where a story you have been living inside suddenly tears open and shows you another story running parallel to it all along. This was one of those moments. For me, for Adiaze, and very soon for Emmanuel himself. Because Adiaze, it turned out, had a father who did not stay quiet. The confrontation happened on a Sunday. That detail still stays with me. A Sunday. The day Emmanuel dressed his best, greeted people at church with that easy confidence, shook the pastor's hand, and sat in the 3rd row from the front like a man whose conscience had no outstanding bills. Adaize's father, Chief Okonkwo, arrived at our compound at 11 in the morning with his wife, his brother, and Adaize herself. I had not invited them. I had not planned any of this. But Adaize had told her parents everything the night before, and Chief Okonkwo was not the kind of man who waited. I heard the gate open. I heard voices outside. I came to the window and looked out and felt my heart do something complicated, fear and something else, something that felt almost like relief. Emmanuel was in the parlor reading a newspaper. He had not gone to church that morning because of a headache. Providence, I thought. Chief Okonkwo's voice was large enough to fill the street. Emmanuel Nusu, come out here. Come and meet a man today. Neighbors opened their doors. Curtains moved. A woman selling akara down the road stopped frying and turned to look. Within 5 minutes, there were people gathered outside our gate the way people gather when something real is happening, quietly, quickly, pretending they are passing by while they listen to every word. Emmanuel came out with that careful, controlled face of his, the face that said, I am not afraid, I have done nothing wrong, let us handle this like adults. But Chief Okonkwo was not interested in handling things quietly. You have been seeing my daughter for over 1 year. My daughter who did not know you had a wife. My daughter who you told you were a single man building his life. You sat in my house and ate my food and asked about her future. And all this time you had a wife and a son? Emmanuel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You met her when she was 19 years old. Chief Okonkwo continued, his voice dropping now, which was somehow worse than the shouting. 19. And you, how old are you? 34? 35? You are a full man, and this is what you do with your fullness. You hunt young girls? That word hunt hung in the air. I was standing at the door now. I had David on my hip. My son was looking at the crowd with wide, curious eyes, not understanding, just watching, and I was looking at Emmanuel, watching him look for an exit that wasn't there, watching his shoulders drop slowly, slowly, as the image he had spent years building cracked right down the center in front of the people he had built it for. His church chairman was in the crowd. His closest friend, who was always at our house for those dinners where I was sent away like a child, he was there too, standing near the gate, saying nothing, but looking at Emmanuel with an expression that was no longer admiration. Adaize stood beside her father, and she was crying. Not the dramatic crying of someone performing pain. The quiet, steady crying of a girl who had genuinely believed in someone and was only now understanding the full size of the lie she had been living inside. I recognized that crying. I had done it alone in my kitchen for years. Emmanuel finally spoke. He said, "This is not what it looks like. Let us go inside and talk." Inside? Chief Okonkwo almost laughed. You want us to go inside so you can manage the story? No, you managed your story long enough. You managed it with this young woman here. He pointed at me. How old was she when you married her? 18? And you were how old? You have made a career of this, finding young girls before they are old enough to know what they are agreeing to. And then Chief Okonkwo turned and looked at me directly. His voice changed. It became quieter, almost gentle. My daughter, how long have you been in this? I had not planned to speak. I had not planned to be anything in this moment except a bystander in my own life. But I looked at this man, this stranger who had come to my compound on a Sunday morning in his agbada, who had enough anger in him to fill the street, and he had turned that anger away from me and called me my daughter, and something broke open in my chest. 5 years, I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. I was 17 when he started coming around me, 18 when I left my family for him. My son is 2. The crowd was completely silent. I continued, and I do not know where the words came from. Maybe they had been sitting inside me all this time, waiting for an audience. He told me I had nowhere else to go. He said it so many times I started to believe him. But I am calling my mother this evening, and I am going home, and I am never coming back. Emmanuel looked at me. In that look, and I know this sounds strange, I saw something new. Not anger, not control, just a man who had finally run out of room to manage the story. He looked small. For the first time since I was 17 years old, the man who made me feel like I was nothing without him looked small. I left that compound 3 days later with David on my back and one bag of our things. My mother was at her gate when the taxi turned into our street. She had been standing there, my younger sister told me later, since the morning, just waiting. She had not known what time I was coming or even if I was truly coming, but she stood there anyway. When I stepped out of the car, she walked toward me and did not say a word. She just put her arms around me and held me and David together, the three of us standing in front of the yellow compound with the mango tree, and I felt something I had almost forgotten existed. Safety. Plain, uncomplicated safety. I cried. Finally, properly cried. Not the silent kitchen crying, not the muffled pillow crying, but the deep, ugly, long overdue crying of a woman who had been holding herself together with nothing but stubbornness and had finally been given permission to let go. My father came out. He stood a few feet away. He was a quiet man, my father. He did not rush to hug me or make speeches. He just looked at me for a long moment with those tired, loving eyes, and then he said, "You are back. That is enough." Emmanuel lost his position on the church committee 3 weeks later. Two of the men who had sat in my parlor eating my food and laughing while he dismissed me publicly refused to return his calls. Adaize's family withdrew formally, and her father, I was told, made certain that the story was known among people who needed to know it. I do not tell you this to celebrate his suffering. I am not a person who enjoys watching people fall, but I am honest enough to say that justice, even imperfect and partial justice, did something for me. It told me that I had not imagined what happened. It told me that what he did had a name and that name was wrong, and the world, at least a small part of it on a Sunday morning on our street, agreed. I went back to school at 24, a nursing program at a school in Enugu. I was the oldest in my set by 5 years, and I did not care one single day. I sat in those lectures with my notebook and my pen, and I thought of my father's voice saying, "Your education is the land I am giving you." I thought of all the years I had wasted believing a man's attention was worth my own future. Emmanuel started primary school the same year I started nursing school. On the first day, I dropped him at the gate and then drove myself to class, and I sat in the car for a moment before going in. I was 24 years old. I had a son, a broken marriage, a trauma I was still learning to carry, and a whole life ahead of me that was now finally pointing in a direction I had chosen myself. I breathed in, I breathed out, and I walked in. Flora's life did not end at 18 when she made a wrong turn. It began again at 24 when she found her way back.